Hello. Today I'm going to give a brief overview of what cognition is and the main elements or domains of cognition that we use in our everyday lives. Simply put, cognition is just thinking. It's the mental processes that allow us to gain knowledge and to put that knowledge to action in the world. Some of these cognitive processes we're aware of, and some of them we're really not aware of at all. Cognition in general is less concerned with what we know, the facts, as it is with how we get to know things and how we can put that knowledge into action. So the brain has a lot of work that it has to do, and so there are quite a number of different cognitive processes. One traditional way to describe them is to divide cognition into verbal versus nonverbal abilities. Verbal abilities include things like being able to read and speak and write, whereas nonverbal abilities include things like dealing with objects or how things are arranged in space, paying attention to detail, eye-hand coordination, or other kinds of tasks that don't involve language. Before I come to the big 5 domains of cognition, which are attention, learning and memory, speed of processing, executive functions, and social cognition, I want to briefly talk about how the brain needs lower levels of basic data, which is then fed up and used by the brain to engage in more sophisticated processing. So I live in an area that's got bears, and before I can cope with the presence of a bear, I need to know that it's there. I can see, I can hear, or sometimes I can even smell things that alert me to the presence of a bear by my senses detecting shape or color, size, or texture that a bear is present. Now these data are really sensory data that are fundamental building blocks. I mention this because some cognitive remediation computer programs will specifically target those basic sensory processes for improvement. The old adage of you have garbage in, you get garbage out sort of applies here, because you want lower level data to be higher quality so that the output that comes when you're analyzing that data about how to cope with the bear is of also high quality. Okay, let's move on to what I call the 5 big types of cognition. And the first one is attention. So attention really simply means focusing your awareness onto something and reducing focus on something else. There are many forms of attention. So if I hear a cracking sound in the forest, I attend to that. That's simple attention. And if I stay focused on it, then that's sustained attention. If I have 2 things to do at the same time, I'm paying attention to 2 different things. That's called divided attention. And another form of attention relates to not being distracted by other things, to be able to filter out stimuli which aren't really relevant to the task at hand that you're attending to. If attention is good, then it's easier to learn new things, which brings us to our second cognitive domain, which is learning and memory. You have to attend to things before you can learn them. And learning and memory are like a hand and a glove, because you can't remember something if you haven't learned it. It's often wrong to say that someone has a bad memory when in fact they didn't learn something in the first place. The general idea of attention, memory, and learning is that you have to attend to something, and then you encode it or learn it. Then that information is stored in the brain, and then you have to have some way to retrieve it or recall it, which is what we generally refer to as memory. There are different kinds of memory, like memory for facts or memory for personal experiences. But there's also other forms like prospective memory, which refers to remembering to do something in the future. For example, an appointment in 3 days' time. And it's wrong, or it's unfair to assume that a person who misses appointments is uncaring or lazy, when in fact it's a prospective memory problem. A final type of memory is called working memory, which can happen in visual domains and non-verbal domains, as well as in verbal domains. And that's when you have to hold information up in your head and manipulate that information, such as the operations that would occur if you're multiplying 16 by 6 in your head. 6 times 6 is 36. You put the 6 down at the bottom, and then you have to carry the 3, and then you have to keep in mind that the 6 is down at the bottom when you've done the other multiplication. So it's that kind of process which is called working memory. The third type of cognition is speed of processing, which is just simply being quick. And this can be purely mental, or it can involve a motor or physical act as a response. So think of reaction time, for example. The fourth major domain is a large variety of functions called executive functions. And they're often associated with what we would think of as higher cortical or higher cognitive processes, and include things like reasoning, abstract thinking, problem solving, putting things in sequences like the steps to make a meal. And there's lots of other executive functions as well. One is estimations. For example, how far away the bear is from me, how fast the bear is going to get to me if it's moving towards me, or the height of a building. Another executive function is inhibition, which is the ability to stop or hold yourself back. And this is just the opposite of impulsiveness. And finally, I want to mention one other executive function, which is this amazing human ability to think about what we're thinking. And this is called metacognition. And metacognition is actually another target for a sophisticated form of cognitive remediation called metacognitive training, in which people learn to analyze what it is that they're thinking and the way in which they're thinking and change those. Finally, there's social cognition. And these are the mental processes we need to understand and navigate through the social world. And to do that successfully, we need to be able to do things like look at a person's face and understand what emotion they're expressing, to be able to read someone's body language, or to be able to have some idea of what someone's thinking in a social situation, what the other person's thinking in a social situation. Also, to be able to have some understanding of what the expectations and the normal appropriate behaviors are in a given social situation. So I'm going to conclude by just saying that of these cognitive abilities, people vary tremendously, with some people being really good at some things and not very good at other sorts of things. But every single one of these forms of cognition has been shown to be amenable to improvement with cognitive remediation. So I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Mahesh Menon, who will describe how difficulties with cognition and cognitive functions can affect daily living. And he'll also update us on the status of cognitive functions in persons with psychotic disorders. Thanks very much.